Our special guest speaker tonight started his public service career in the Office of the United States Attorney and rose quickly to the Associate Attorney General, the third highest position in the United States Department of Justice. In 1993, he was elected mayor of New York City. His focus was on reducing crime and implementing the largest and most successful Welfare to Work initiative in this country. In 1997, he was reelected with 57% of the vote in a city in which Democrats outnumbered Republicans 5-1. So he must have been doing something right.
As we all know, on September 11th in 2001, America suffered the worst attack in its history when terrorists crashed planes into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. Our speaker was widely lauded for his steady hand during challenging times. He was named Person of the Year by Time magazine, knighted by the Queen of England, and dubbed Rudy the Rock by French President Jacques Chirac. Since leaving office, he's entered the corporate world and has started his own consulting service, which specializes in emergency preparedness, public safety, leadership during crises, and financial management. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mr. Rudy Giuliani.
Thank you very, very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. And when I was being introduced and they mentioned that New York City is 5-1 Democratic, it reminded me of a nightmare I had once. It was about 4 days before the election. And I was, working for every vote. And I was in Brooklyn. I remember exactly where I was, and I was shaking hands with people. Will you vote for me? Will you vote for me? Yes, yeah. I went up to this man. I grabbed his hand, I shook it, and said, would you please vote for me? And he looked at me and he said, I wouldn't vote for a Republican if hell froze over. God damn it. I said, thank you. I didn't know what else to say. And I moved on. And the election was a couple of days later, and I won. And then a few months later, I was sworn in as the mayor. Forgotten about this man completely. I was in office for 1 month, and I had the radio on to wake me up. The radio awakened me with a news story. The news story was this. The announcer said, Mayor Giuliani's been in office for 1 month, and he's already set a record. I kind of pushed myself up in bed, kind of really thinking, wow, wonder what kind of record I set in 1 month. Whew, that's getting off to a good start. He said he set a record for more snow in January than in the last 100 years. And there's snow predicted for today. So first thing that came to mind was, I knew I was elected to reduce crime, fix the budget, fix the economy. I didn't know I was supposed to end snow. But as time went by and we got more and more snow that winter, which turned out to be one of our worst, 96, a couple of years later, was our worst. I had that too. I started to have these nightmares. Like this man would appear in my dream, and he would say, if a Republican gets elected mayor, hell will freeze over. I thought, man, maybe he knows something. I shouldn't have run for this office. I should have run for governor or senator or something else. But here's the good news. And for those of you who aren't Republicans, please excuse, but I am partisan. The last 3 years we were in office, there was virtually no snow. Now, Al Gore thinks this is because of global warming. Big Al should have been in New York this winter. Or how about Al try Boston and give a lecture about global warming in Boston? In any event, here's the reason why there was no snow, honestly. Republican policies and programs. If they can reduce taxes, they can reduce snow. Well, at least my theory is as scientific as Al's, so I'll go with mine. I feel somewhat humbled by talking to all of you about leadership, which is one of the two things I'm going to talk about, leadership and the political climate that we exist in, because all of you are leaders. Prime Source, and great organization, delivers tremendous service. All of you in your own right, the customers and the people who are part of the organization are all leaders. So excuse me if I mention things you already know. But before I left office, I decided I was going to write a book about leadership. And I thought I'd write a book about leadership because when I ran for mayor of New York City was averaging somewhere between 1,800 and 2,200 murders a year. That's about the number of people that died in the entire war in Afghanistan. Just want to give you, in 1 year. A year and a half would be more than died in the entire war in Afghanistan. So New York was the crime capital of America. We were on the front cover of Time magazine in 1992, 1993. I got elected in 93 as the rotting of the Big Apple. All about how the city was falling apart, too much crime, 10.5% unemployment, 1.1 million people on welfare, population down by 400,000, taxpayers fleeing, and no new Fortune 100 company in the last 20 years, and about 9 that left. So my slogan, my campaign slogan, was very simple, and I might suggest this slogan for the Republican candidate in a year from now. It goes something like this: you can't do any worse. Now, this works in New York because people are sarcastic and they have great sense of humor, but I go in front of audiences and I'd say, oh, guys, give me a shot. What am I going to do, have 2,500 murders? I know, I don't know if I can be a great mayor, but I know following this guy, I can be a good mayor. So could my son, but, I don't want to say. So I turned around New York City to a very large extent. Crime under me went down 65%, murder 65%. My successor, Michael Bloomberg, who carried on a lot of my policies, if not all of them, and improved them, did a great job. By the end of Michael's term, crime was down between 80 and 85%. New York City went from being the crime capital of America to within 4 years being the safest large city in the country. And it stayed that way now for 16 years. What it did for the economy was tremendous. Before I was the mayor, I was the U.S. attorney in Manhattan. I prosecuted hundreds, if not thousands, of mafia members. They just revealed, you think you're over with this, and they just revealed an article about 6 months ago, the trial in Italy, that the Mafia Commission took a vote to kill me. And they voted it down 3-2. Since I was tape recording them, I know the 2 who wanted to kill me. So I turned around the U.S. Attorney's Office. I had run a coal company as a receiver in bankruptcy and took it out of bankruptcy. I had been the third-rank official in the Justice Department, so I thought I knew a lot about how you inspire people, lead people, set goals, and do turnarounds, which is a lot of what I do in my business today at Giuliani Partners and my law firm, Bracewell Giuliani. So I wrote this book about leadership, and I tried to figure out where I learned what I did, and then tried to give some lessons to apply to other people. Well, I was writing the book in 2001. The book was going to be published shortly after I left office, maybe a month or 2 after I left office, and it was almost done, and it was sitting in my drawer on the day of September 11, 2001, and I didn't go back and look at the book for 6 months. I actually, 4 months, have a very hazy recollection of everything that I did because it was a complete nightmare. And then when I left office, I almost didn't want to go back and review it for about 3 or 4 months. And when I went back to the book, I realized there was a certain kind of arrogance in the book. The arrogance in the book was, I thought I knew everything. And I thought I knew everything about crisis management, and boy, we got hit with one that I never expected. And I found out things about myself and about other people that I don't think I ever would have found out. And I realized you can never, ever, ever anticipate all the things that are going to happen in life. You can't anticipate all the things that are going to happen in business. You can't anticipate all the things happening in government, world affairs, or in your own personal life. So you always have to be ready, and you always have to be trying to improve yourself as a leader, because a leader is a person who first and foremost is in charge of themselves. And that's really the first lesson of leadership. And I told you I learned all these lessons from other people, and they all came from somewhere. The nice thing about writing the book was it made me think about where they came from. The first lesson of leadership is to be a leader, you have to have strong beliefs. You have to have a goal. You have to know where you are taking things. Now, depending on what you're leading, this can change, right? If you're leading a business, you have to have goals for the people that are all working for you. Because if you don't have goals for them, they don't know how to help you get there. If you lead a government, you have to have goals for the government, what you want to achieve. You want to lower taxes. You want to lower unemployment. You want to improve schools. You have to have these goals. Because then all these people, these 300,000 people that are working for you, at least they know what you want from them, what you expect from them. If you can't set goals, if you don't have a set of core beliefs and values about your business or about the government agency you're running or the football team that you're coaching, then everything just goes adrift. Think of it this way. The quintessential leader is the captain of a ship. The captain of the ship has to make an initial decision so everybody else on the ship can do their job. And what's that decision? Where are we going? Are we going to Bermuda? Are we going to Puerto Rico? Are we going all the way over to England, to Portsmouth? Where are we going? If the captain can't figure out where we're going, then nobody on the ship knows how to help him get there. And the ship goes anywhere the winds take it, the waves take it, the storms take it. It could go someplace nice or get destroyed. There are some people who believe our government is being run that way today. There certainly are the businesses that I have seen that are run that way, where nobody sets goals, and I go into them and try to fix them, and people will tell me, well, I never knew it was expected of me. I didn't know what. So one of the ways first let me tell you where I learned that. I learned that by having the privilege for working for President Ronald Reagan. I worked for President Reagan really for 8 years, but for 2.5 years in Washington, got to know him. And Ronald Reagan had goals. He had two big ones. One was to confront communism and defeat it. All the presidents before him, Republican and Democrat, had kind of bought into the idea of détente. We can get along. We can have mutually assured destruction. And my president, because I consider him my president because he's the one that I work for, my president thought that mutually assured destruction was an insane way to keep the world safe. Because if you just make one mistake and one maniac becomes the head of a country that has the button, patoom, millions of people die. That's not a way to keep the world safe. So he confronted communism and he defeated it. by outspending them, by frightening them. Remember when he slipped and said that the missiles had been sent to Moscow and it was just like a joke he was making? I always wondered if it was really a joke. If you read Gorbachev's book, it scared the you-know-what out of the people in Russia. When he fired the air traffic controllers and wouldn't let them come back to work ever again, Gorbachev writes in his book, that's when we knew he was a serious man. Contrasted to this president, who drew 12 red lines in the sand and said to Assad, if you use chemical weapons, there will be serious consequences from my country. He drew the first line, it was red. By the time we were finished, it started to get pink. And by the time it was over, it was completely yellow. He did nothing. One thing you never do, never, ever do, as a leader of a government, ever, is threaten and then not follow through. The minute you do that, like a parent, they all figure you out, right? They figure out exactly who you are. And they figure out how far they can push you. Why do you think Putin is pushing us so hard? Why do you think Iran is pushing us so hard? Why do you think we are engaged in the foolish idea that we can allow Iran to have nuclear power? Reckless idea. The head of Iran, the head of the government, the dictator of the country, the Ayatollah Khomeini, is a maniac. He is calling for the destruction of the state of Israel. He is calling for death to America. I don't know. I don't think he's kidding. I don't see a smile on his face when he says it. Last thing in the world I would do is get that guy anywhere near nuclear material. But I'm not the president. Leadership means setting goals and sticking to them. Leadership, when you run a country of 300 million plus people, means having our enemies fear you. The people who want to come here and do harm to us should be afraid of the President of the United States. And the President of the United States has to be willing to accept whatever criticisms he gets for making people afraid of him, because when he puts his hand on that Bible, he swears to protect you and my children. And if he doesn't have the moral gumption, the strength, the power to convey that, you're at risk. That's what it means to set goals. And in a business, what it means is you set goals every year for your business. What do you want to achieve? How big do you want to get? How much do you want to grow? Any new product lines? What do you expect from your employees? Every year I would give a State of the City speech, and in that I would set the goals for all of my people. And then we'd measure them, because I believe also in measuring. Like, I knew I wasn't going to reduce crime in 2 months or 3 months or 4 months. I knew it was going to take a long time. So I developed a CompStat system with Bill Bratton and Jack Maple, and we measured crime every single week. We had a meeting every Thursday morning at 8 o'clock, and we put on a big screen all the crime statistics. The police precincts that were succeeding were obvious. The ones that weren't were obvious. And then you could go and look and you can see why. Awful lot of auto thefts in the southern part of Brooklyn. How come there were so many in the southern part of Brooklyn? I'll tell you why. Because the mafia controlled a lot of the southern part of Brooklyn. And they stole upper-end cars that was right near the Verrazano Bridge. They could get it over the bridge, and they could have it in Maryland before you came home at night and found out your car was gone. And it was on a boat to Brazil or Argentina or someplace else where they were going to sell it. Well, once we figured that out, we could figure out a response to it. And we stopped auto theft in the southern part of Brooklyn. Of course, they moved to the northern part of Brooklyn. And then we chased them there. And then when they went to the Bronx, they didn't find as many good cars, but we chased them there. But that's what I mean by setting goals. The second thing that a leader has to be, and in the economy that we have right now, and your business is relying a great deal on building and housing, and you've got to be an optimist. If you want to be a leader, you have to convey optimism. Suppose when I came out and I was introduced, I began my speech like this. Things are bad. Things are really bad, and they're not going to get any better, and there is no hope. None. Follow me. Well, of course, nobody follows me when I say that, except a few nuts in Manhattan. They follow. In Manhattan, they'd follow. There's somebody to follow anybody in Manhattan. People follow solutions to problems. They follow the person who is offering what appears to be a rational, sensible solution to the problem. And no matter what problems you face in the ups and downs of our economy, whether it's building or finance or any of the areas of our economy, you've always got to have a plan for how you're going to deal with it and how you're going to make it better. Are you going to cut back here? Are you going to cut back there? You're going to try to move into some other line? You always got to be struggling with problems. I'll give you an example from my legal career. I have had the occasion over my life to train many, many lawyers. From my time in private law practice and from my time in the Justice Department, U.S. Attorney's Office, I've probably hired 400, 500 lawyers and trained 60 or 70. And every once in a while, this happens with a very young lawyer. We have a case. We file our brief. We think we're going to win. They think we're going to win. The brief from the other side comes in, they answer everything, and they come up with some things we didn't think of. And one of the young lawyers runs into my office, totally panicked. I don't understand. We can't win this case. Look what they said. Look what they did. They go on and on for about 4 or 5 minutes, like in a little bit of a frenzy. So I wait until they finish. Always let them get it out. And then I say, how much time do we have to answer that brief? And they say 60 days. I said, in other words, this isn't an emergency. And they say, yes, but. I said, but it's not an emergency. Like the building's not burning down. Right. I said, well, here's what I want you to do. I want you to pick up all the papers you just threw all over my office. Pick them all up. I want you to go back to your office. And I want you to sit there for 1 hour. The first 15 minutes, I want you to do exactly what you did in my office. Go crazy. Yell, scream, cry, throw something. Just don't break anything valuable. Then for the next 45 minutes, I want you to do the best you can to put down on a piece of paper how you would answer each one of these issues. What's your solution? I don't care if it's crazy. I don't care if it's off the wall. Don't make it illegal. Then I want you to come back to me, and then I want you to tell me the problem, but I want to tell me what you think the solution is. And I'm doing this for a very special reason. I'm doing this because I'm teaching you to be a leader. Everybody can tell you the problem. Everybody can complain. It's the people who rise to the top who take the complaints and turn them into solutions. Or, if you don't have a solution, turn them into making it better. Reducing the problem, if you can't eliminate the problem. I could never, ever, in a million years, solve the problem of crime. I believe only God can do that. There are always going to be criminals. What I could do is reduce it dramatically. I don't know if we can solve the problem of poverty. I don't know. I think we should try. We should try. but I don't know that we can eliminate it completely. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to make things better for people. In your business, I don't know if there are problems that can't actually be solved, but there may be ways to mitigate it, make it easier, make it work better. And then sometimes you have these problems you really can solve. But you yourself, when I say optimist, I don't necessarily mean, being funny or taking things lightly. I actually mean taking things very seriously, but turning problems into solutions. Like having a little switch that goes off in your head. Okay, this is enough time thinking about the problem. Now I'm going to start thinking about the solution to the problem. When I was mayor, I got a call one day from my doctor. He was my urologist. I had gone in for tests for possible prostate cancer. And I hadn't really thought about it very much because I was so busy. And he said to me, Mayor, the tests came back and they're positive. I said, oh, great, thanks, Alex, I'll see you soon. And then I realized for a doctor, positive is negative. I said, oh, gee, I have prostate cancer? He said, yes. I said, all right, well, I'll see you in a couple of weeks. He said, no, you really should come in and see me, tomorrow. I said, I'm really busy tomorrow. He said, so I kind of put him off. Put it out of my mind, gave 3 speeches that night, went to bed, I got up the next morning, and my ritual when I was the mayor, and the last couple of weeks has been my ritual also because the headlines in the Post and the Daily News always interest me. My first thing I did was to take out the News and the Post and look at the headlines. And I used to represent the Daily News, so I know why those headlines are written that way. Those headlines are written because they want you to buy the News instead of the Post. And the Post wants you to buy the Post instead, and they both, try to overdo the other. So first I pull out the News. I look at it, it says, Mayor has cancer. I said, I don't like that headline. Then I looked at the Post. The Post said, Mayor has cancer. Now I knew I had cancer, because the Post always liked me. See, the News might have written that just to shake me up. But if the Post wrote it, it had to be true. And I will tell you, for a day or so, I was really shook up. I was really feeling sorry for myself. I was strong, I was healthy, there was nothing wrong with me, I had no pain, and my father died of prostate cancer, and he died a very painful death, which I watched. And after about a day and a half of talking to friends of mine, my doctor, and my wife, who's a nurse, something went off in my head like this. Maybe one of them said it to me, or I said to myself, I'm a very lucky man. I really am a very lucky man, because I was given a warning about something that could kill me that I can now do something about. Some people don't get that warning. People on September 11 didn't get the warning. Those Christians that were killed a couple of weeks ago didn't get any warning when those animals chopped their heads off. Some people don't get a warning. I'm a very lucky man. I got a warning, and at least I can arrest it, slow it down, and maybe I can cure it. And from then on, my whole attitude toward it has been optimism. You got to take a problem, you got to turn it around, and you got to get it toward a solution. In order to do that, you got to have the third principle, which is courage. And courage is not understood by most people. Most people think of courage as firefighters who go into buildings and save people, or soldiers who go into battle and win the Congressional Medal of Honor. Well, that is courage, of course. But when you think about that type of courage, you often think that these people are fearless, that they have some special quality that makes them fearless. Not true. They're all afraid. Firefighters who go into fires are afraid. Men who go into battle are afraid. During September 11, I was afraid. What they can do is control their fear. get control of it. Don't let it overwhelm them. Whenever you're trying something new, whenever you're trying something that's risky, which applies in investments or new business ventures, there's always the risk of failure. There is never 100% risk of success or possibility of success or necessity of success. So to be able to be a leader, you have to be able to take risk. And there's a way to use fear to make you and your organization more effective. And it's the fourth principle of leadership. And it's called relentless preparation. If you want to reduce the fear you have that you're going to fail, you prepare and prepare and prepare and prepare and prepare. I learned that from the judge that I had the privilege of being a law clerk to, who taught me how to be a trial lawyer. And he would say, for every 1 hour in court, 4 hours of preparation. You got to go over everything, you got to rehearse it, and then rehearse it again. Nothing in court should happen that you didn't anticipate. Now, that's a great lesson, by the way. Anytime you have to give a presentation, anytime you have to present some new product or an old product to a new customer, prepare it, go over it. Have somebody ask the questions that you think are going to be asked. Just don't go walk in and kind of wing it. The better prepared you are, the better your answer is going to be. And by the way, if you give public speeches, the better prepared you are, the more relaxed you're going to be. And when you're relaxed, you can think better. That lesson had a second part to it that on September 11 of 2001 became maybe the most important thing that helped me through it. The second part of the lesson was this. The judge would say, no matter how much you prepared, at any difficult trial, something unexpected happens. And if you follow my rule of 4 hours of preparation for every 1 hour in court, you will know the answer to that, and it will come to you like this. And people will think, wow, what a smart guy that guy is. He can think on his feet. It doesn't come from thinking on your feet. It comes from all the work you did before that. Because probably the surprising thing has something to do with a lot of what you prepared. Now, I'll tell you how that applied on September 11th. When I first heard of the attack, I was at the Peninsula Hotel in Midtown Manhattan. And one of the police officers that was with me came up to my counsel, explained it to him, and he explained to me that a twin-engine plane had hit the North Tower. So I rushed down there, and as I was getting there, I could see the tremendous flames. I realized it was worse than they described it. I didn't know if it was a terrorist attack or an accident. And then all of a sudden, about 1 mile away, there was a tremendous explosion at the top of the tower. I got a call from the police commissioner that a second plane had hit. And of course, I knew it was a terrorist attack at that point. But I really didn't absorb the magnitude of this until I actually got there. Got out of my van and walked right below the North Tower to the fire department command post. And as I was walking, I was looking up because debris was falling down and hitting people, and in some cases, killing them or crushing them. And the police were worried that we were getting too close. But I had to talk to the fire chief to find out what he needed and to coordinate my police department and my fire department, because I had this terrible thing going on there, but I also had a whole rest of the city that was open to attack. And now that it's over, we know there were 4 attacks. When I was in the middle of it, it could have been 10, could have been 15, could have been suicide bombings. The FBI thought this was a signal for suicide bombings all over the city. So I had to figure out how many police do I give the fire department to help with the rescue, And then what do I have left over to protect the rest of the city? So as I'm walking and looking up, all of a sudden, I can't believe this, but I see a man 101 stories up. This must have been 2 seconds. It seems like an hour now when I think back on it. And I could almost feel what he must have been thinking, which is, do I get burned by the fire or do I jump out of the window? And he jumped out of the window. I don't know who the man is. And I saw him come all the way down. I think I was in a state of shock, wouldn't admit it to myself at the time. And I grabbed the police commissioner's arm and I said, this is much worse than anything you've ever faced before. We do not have a plan for this, and we're just going to have to go with our instinct and ask God's help. Now, what I meant by that was we had 25 emergency plans. I was a compulsive emergency planner. I started the Mayor's Office of Emergency Management. It had never existed before. We did plans for hurricanes, high-rise fires, blackouts, terrorist attacks, like the suicide bombings that were going on at that time in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, floods, hostage situations. All of them were in a book. At this point, many of them were online. Everybody knew their role. And then we would go through the emergency, then we'd critique it and we'd try to improve for the next time something like that happened. But I didn't have a plan called airplanes being used as missiles attacking my buildings. But I immediately had to make decisions. We had to, first of all, close off the tunnels so nobody else could come into the city, because the police commissioner felt that any terrorists that are already in the city, fine, but we're not letting any more in, if this is a signal for them to come and attack us. So we cut off the tunnels from New Jersey in particular, and I'll tell you why, because the attack in 1993 was planned in a mosque in New Jersey by an imam who is now spending 100 years in jail. So when you hear about why the police want to be in mosques and the FBI want to be in mosques, I have no patience for people who say they shouldn't be there. I can't imagine Cardinal Egan being at all upset if I had several police officers in St. Patrick's Cathedral. In fact, I think he would rather like it. And I'm sure that's true of every rabbi in New York City and every minister in New York City. So I can't imagine why any imam would have the slightest problem with a police officer sharing in their service, unless he's saying something he doesn't want the police officer to hear. So I have no patience for this. You can't put the police, because had we been putting police in those mosques in 1993, the bombing in 1993 never would have happened. So when I became mayor, I stuck them in there. Mayor Bloomberg kept them there. And the present mayor has taken them away. And the present mayor, well, I won't say anything else. So we stopped people from coming in. We had to evacuate 400,000 people. We had to triage the hospitals because only 3 hospitals in that area, and they were overwhelmed with people. We had to bring in heavy equipment. We had to bring in generators to light up Ground Zero. And as I was making the decision, Judge McMahon's words came back to me. If you prepare for everything you can think of, and we prepare for the other 25 things, you'll be prepared for even the unexpected. And every one of the things that I decided came out of one of our plans. Every one of the things I had decided we had done at least once or twice or 3 times before. And it gave me confidence that I knew what I was doing, and it gave me confidence that I was turning it over to people who I knew what they were doing, and then I could move on to the next thing that I had to. And that's why relentless preparation is so important. This is why football teams practice, because they want to win. This is why boxers practice, because they don't want to get hurt. And there's a fear in all these things. But you take that fear and you put it into hard work and relentless preparation. My law firm has made decisions to expand. Since I've come to my firm, we've just about doubled in size. Most of our decisions worked, some didn't. Each one of them there was a risk. We tried very, very hard to minimize that risk by a lot of planning, a lot of preparation, a lot of thinking about who the lawyers would be that we would acquire and what lines of practice we would go in. Luckily, we were right most of the time. I think we were right most of the time because we prepared so hard for it. So I urge you to be a relentless preparer for anything you do in your business and get your people to be that way. The fifth principle of leadership is obvious. It's teamwork. Nobody ever achieves anything successful or of great significance without a lot of good people helping them. And sometimes a leader can lose that. The judge I clerked for used to have another little saying that was sort of illustrative of this. He would say to his young law clerks who were very smart but naive, he would say to them, "What do you think of federal judges?" You'd say, "I don't know, Judge. They seem very cranky or old." He said, "Well, how do you think they become federal judges?" He said, I don't know. He said, "Well, here's how they become federal judges. They're either a Republican or a Democrat, and they get appointed by a political process. But when they get appointed, some of them start to believe that they were appointed by God. God put me here. I'm a judge. I'm very important. I know everything." Then he would say, this can happen in a lot of, you become head of a company, head of a division, president of a university, coach of a little league team. And you think, wow, I know everything. Judge used to say, here's the antidote to it. Whenever you're put in charge of any number of people, first thing to do, and I've added this part to it, look in the mirror and say to yourself, what are my weaknesses? What don't I do well? If your answer is none, ask your wife or your husband. If both of you agree that neither one of you do nothing wrong, ask your children and then go see a psychiatrist, because you have some kind of dysfunctional relationship. Now, when you ask that question, what you're looking for are, what are you strong at, what are you weak at, and how do I balance those weaknesses? So in my case, when I became the mayor, I was very, very strong. I knew a great deal about law enforcement. I've been involved in it mostly all my life, at the lowest levels and the highest levels. I knew exactly what I wanted to do to reduce crime. I knew I was going to be able to do it. I wasn't sure I could do it as much as I did, but I knew I could do it. The other part of my problem was I had 1.1 million people on welfare. I had a budget deficit of $2.3 billion. We hadn't had a new job in about 5 years. We lost 400,000 jobs. I had a massive budget and economic problem about which I did not know very much. I was not an expert in that. So I had to hire good people to help me with both, because I couldn't do either myself. But with regard to law enforcement, I knew as much about it as they did. I thought I knew more than they did, actually, but I certainly knew as much as they did. On the other side, different. I didn't know as much as they did. I may have been the mayor, but I had to listen to them. I had to have them teach me. I had to be very careful in picking them to make sure I could trust them. If I made a mistake on the law enforcement side, I'd see it right away and I could get rid of them. On the other side, harder. No matter what you do, you're going to be good at something and not, maybe you're great with client relations, but you're not good with details and planning. Maybe it's the other way around. Well, you go find somebody to be your number 2 or your number 3 who's good at what you're not good at. And then what you'll find out is you both become pretty good at what you weren't so good at because you teach each other. A team is a balance of strengths and weaknesses because all of us have those. So no matter what kind of team you're putting together, a sales team, a team that is planning the future of your business, you got to balance it with people, some people who are, I'll give you another example, kind of more that goes to emotion. I make decisions really quick, which is very good in an emergency. That's why I handle emergencies really well. But a lot of the decisions don't have to be made quickly. And if you slow down a little, maybe you're going to see some problems that you don't see if you go too fast. So I have a partner for 33 years who's practiced law with me, been in business with me, and was my counsel when I was mayor, and was with me every second of September 11, including the 20 minutes we were trapped in a building and people thought we were dead. He was at my side then too. He goes very slow. For example, he's been out of government now 13 years. So in government, you don't make a lot of money. Well, he's made a lot of money now since he's been out of government. And he's still buying a house. He can't figure out what house to buy. And it's 13 years. We believe that he still has all the money that he got at his bar mitzvah. This guy takes forever to decide anything. Well, he is a great balance for me because he slows me down. And on September 11, he didn't slow me down. On September 11, he had the instinct to know, okay, no time for thinking, just time for intuitive reaction. But I don't know if I now need somebody like that. I'm older, but certainly when I was U.S. Attorney and first mayor, I needed somebody like that because I was impetuous. I wanted things done now. And some things can't be done now. Some things take 6 months and a year. So the point that I'm making is part of being a leader is being self-critical and analytical about yourself. What are you good at? What are you not so good at? How do I find somebody to help me be good? How do I find somebody to help me be good at the things I'm not good at so that the team is even better than I am? This is what a football coach does who's a great defensive expert. And he becomes head of a team, like if Rex Ryan, when he became head of the Jets, had been able to find himself an offensive coordinator that was as good at being an offensive coordinator as he was as a defensive coordinator, maybe he would have won 2 Super Bowls. Instead, the New York Giants did. I am an out-of-control Yankee and Giant fan. I can't help it. Don't applaud. It's purely a function of brainwashing. My father brought me home from the hospital in a Yankee uniform. And he kept whispering in my ear, before I can remember, the Yankees are the best team in all of sports. Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Joe DiMaggio, did exactly the same thing to my son. My son is a totally out-of-control Yankee fan. That's what happens when, you brainwash people. The final principle of leadership is to be a leader, you have to communicate. Everything I said doesn't mean anything if you can't explain it to the people you have to explain it to the people that work for you, the people that work with you. You got to tell them your goals. You got to measure their progress. I'm a big believer in metrics. If you have a big long-term goal, you want to grow by 10% in a year or 2 years, you got to measure that the first month and the second month and the third month for 2 reasons. First, to give them feedback about what they're doing right and wrong. And second, by measuring it, it can show you that maybe you were wrong about some of the things that you're doing. So I took that CompStat program that I used for crime and I used it for every other program in city government. I used it for welfare. And I cut welfare from 1.1 million people to 500,000 people. 500,000 of the 600,000 that went off welfare to have jobs. They're working. Real jobs. The other 100,000 went to New Jersey. And Chris Christie is, working on it. He hates it when I say that. So you need to give people, measures of success along the way so you can make adjustments. And metrics, numbers, percentages, batting averages are great ways of doing it. And if you want to figure out how to do that, buy my book. Because I'm going to close with something much more important. If you really want to be a leader of men and women, you have to love them. You have to love them. I did. This may sound very self-serving, and since I'm not running for office, maybe you'll even believe me. I love people. I love people. I love to be with people. I love to talk to people. When I was the mayor, I was exactly the same. I'd stop off in a diner. I'd sit down with people and talk to them. Now I travel around the world. I go to restaurants, talk to people. I go to cigar bars all the time, cigar places where all the guys hang out. I know them all. And you want a good suggestion, any cigar place in America, I can tell you. Go in, I sit down, we talk about sports, we talk about politics. I love people, which is why I love politics. When people come to me, when young men or women come to me and say they want to enter politics, it's the first question I ask them. I say, do you love people? And when they say, well, I don't really like people that much, I say, well, I don't know. Go become a monk. Then you don't have to deal with people. You can just read, you can translate Latin for the rest of your life. So here's what I mean by that. This is a lesson my dad taught me. My dad used to say, and this is a chapter in my book, funerals necessary, weddings discretionary. Now, what did that mean? What that meant was it's more important to go to a funeral than a wedding. And it's more important to go to a funeral than a wedding because your friend who just lost someone needs you more at the funeral than at the wedding. The wedding is a joyful occasion. And if you can be there, it's wonderful to share a wedding with your friends and your relatives. But if you're not, honestly, you're not going to be so missed. At a funeral or a wake, you are going to be missed. People need to be hugged. They need to know when they lose someone they love that there's a support system around for them, that life is going to go on, that life is going to move on. Just the mere act of hugging them and squeezing them and telling them, I love you, I care about you, and if you need any help. I was taught that by one of the greatest men I've ever met, Father Michael Judge, who was a Franciscan priest who died on September 11th, the first body found. And when I heard he was dead, I thought I was lost because he was my crutch. He was my rock. And first time I lost a firefighter, which was very early in my being a mayor, he said to me, we're going to go to the firefighter's home and explain it to the family. I said, you want me to come? And he said, yes. I said, Father, I don't know anything about explaining death to people. I was a prosecutor. He said, there's nothing to it. I'll show you how to do it. He said, first of all, when you walk in that door in, I think it was Woodside, Queens, you think of yourself as Rudy Giuliani. They think of you as the mayor of New York City. The mayor coming to their house, first of all, elevates the importance of their son, of who he was and what he did. That alone is going to lift them. The second thing you can do is show them how much the city cares about what happened, which means they are surrounded by 7 or 8 million people that appreciate this tremendous sacrifice that was made. And I said, well, how do I convey that? Do I just say that? He said, yes, eventually. But here's what you do. You just go up to this poor mother who lost her son, her 27-year-old son, and you put your arm around her and you say, I'm very sorry. He was a hero. It's a shame this had to happen. And if there's anything I can do, please, just call on me. And then I would have with me the benefits they would get, and then we would have a more rational, I shouldn't say rational, but more detailed discussion. I'll tell you a very funny story. Funny. I mean, this isn't funny. It's odd, I guess, but at the time it was. A year later, I had a firefighter who was dying in the hospital. And he was getting better, and then he got really bad. And one morning, I showed up at the hospital in the Bronx, and I walked in, and the fire surgeon told me that the firefighter was really not going to make it. And the family hadn't come to that realization yet. And Father Judge wasn't around. So I went up to the wife of the firefighter, very beautiful young lady, and I said to her, we've got to talk. We've got to talk about this, because I think you're the first one I should talk to about this. And she said, and I said, and of course, if there's anything I can do to help, I'm there now or 5 years from now or 10 years from now. She said, there is something you can do. You can get the Pope to say a mass for my son. I said to myself, holy. How am I going to get the Pope? I mean, usually I used to get requests like, please get the benefits here fast enough, or, see if you can get the right people at the funeral, or got to get the Pope to do this. The long and short of it is, I called Cardinal O'Connor, who was the Cardinal of New York. I told him what I needed. Cardinal not only got the Pope to say a mass, the Cardinal came 15 minutes later. The family was half Jewish and half Catholic, and they didn't get along. The Jewish family didn't want the daughter to marry a Catholic boy, and the Catholic family didn't want to marry a Jewish girl, and they had been married about 4 years, and the families didn't get along. And I explained that to the Cardinal as we walked in. The Cardinal blessed him, did all the things, religious things that you would do. And then he asked if both families would come into a big room with him in the hospital. And for 1 hour, I heard him explain the connection between the Jewish religion and the Catholic religion. And what he said to the Catholic family, who he could push harder, was, you're having trouble with your son being married to a Jewish woman when the founder of your religion died as a Jew? Jesus never became a Christian. There were no Christians then. He said, we may have our differences, but we worship the same God, and to make these things matters of contention as opposed to matters of choice is horrible. This isn't what Jesus would have wanted. It isn't what Moses would have wanted. It's what you want. And they're somewhat more important than you are. And by the way, right now, losing this young man is more important than all of that. And if you can't come together and support each other, it's going to be terrible on the two children. And for that, I think Cardinal O'Connor should become a saint. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. But that's what I mean by you got to be there. You got to be there when things go wrong. If you have people working for you, something goes wrong, that's when they need you. That's when they need you to help them figure out, if it's about a business thing, how to fix it. And if it's a personal thing, you got to be involved in their personal lives as well. And you will get so much more out of them if you do. I'm going to take a few questions, but just in case I forget, I'm going to tell you this story. But you got to promise me you will not tell this story to anybody, because I could get in trouble. And this is a fairly small audience, and you're taping it, so I'm sure it'll be very secure. So on September 14th of 2001, President Bush came to New York. Secret Service did not want him to come because it was too dangerous. We pushed very hard, myself and Governor Pataki pushed very hard for him to come, And the Secret Service made us create a very, very circumscribed program so the president wouldn't be in any danger. It was going to be 15 minutes, you could make a speech, and he was going to get out of there. So we thought he should acknowledge each one of the groups that were helping us. So we picked 10 people, and he was going to thank them for the whole group. When he finished the speech, instead of thanking the group in front, he went behind them and he went right into the crowd because he saw people crying and he saw them in distress. And President Bush, 43 and 41, both of whom I know quite well, love people. And President Bush spent an hour and 15 minutes on what was supposed to be a 15-minute thing. About halfway through, the Secret Service agent nudges me and says, "Go get the president out of the crowd." I said, "Are you crazy? This is the best thing, I mean, this is what my people, this is what they need. They need this lift." President finally comes out. Secret Service pounces on him and tries to rush him away. And as they're rushing him away, he realizes that these 10 people, these poor people are standing there for 1 hour and 15 minutes like this, waiting for him to thank them. So the president pushes the Secret Service back, and he starts thanking them. Firefighter, police officer, rescue worker, nurse, clergyman, health worker, scientist, medical examiner. But we get to about number 7. I look at the end. At the end, we had a construction worker because so many construction workers came and helped us. And in their case, they didn't have to. They didn't work for the city. They came and volunteered. And they came and volunteered on the first day when there was a good chance some of them could die from the stuff that was banging down all over the place and the fires. So we felt that they were some of the unacknowledged heroes. So we wanted to have a construction worker, to show how much we appreciated it. And I'm looking at number 10, and I remembered it was going to be a construction worker, but instead I see this guy, and he looks like really weird. He's a really big guy. Everybody else was like a little soldier. This guy's like walking around like this and making little noises. Said to myself, "Oh my God, we got some New York nut off the street." I mean, there is a 1 in 10 chance in New York that'll happen. My staff really screwed up. This guy can't greet the president. So I was going to reach over, and Governor Pataki, who's a big man, was in between me and President Bush. And I realized if I reached over, the Secret Service shoots you for doing that. And this agent didn't like me. So I couldn't do anything, and it didn't matter because the man reached over, grabbed the president by the hand, pulled him over to him, put one arm around it, put another arm around it, squeezed him, and lifted him a little bit off the ground like this. And he's going like this to him. Here's what he's saying. "I love you, man. I love you, man. I love you, man." The Secret Service agent standing next to me puts his finger in my face and he says to me, "Giuliani, if this guy hurts the president, you're finished." Thank you very much. I'll take a few questions. Who would like to go first? Do we have a microphone, or you just want to scream like we do in Brooklyn? There's a gentleman right here with a red shirt on. I feel like I'm running an auction. You?
Well, with the new election coming up and the changes in Congress, I'd like to get your take on the health care. Everybody's talking about repealing the Obamacare and making the changes, but what changes do you see that would be effective changes to the health care system?
Okay. Here's the most important change to the health care system. Make it more private than government. Going exactly... I could give the next president a very good blueprint of how to straighten out the country. Do everything opposite of what Obama did. So, when I ran for president, what I advocated was spreading out private health insurance, by taking the tax deduction that essentially the business now gets for buying the employee the health insurance and giving that tax benefit directly to the employee, so that the employee will then go out and buy the health insurance the employee wants and that fits the needs of that employee. And I would allow that to be done across the 50 states so that numerous insurance companies were competing with each other. And as insurance companies start competing with each other, they start lowering prices in order to get more customers. I always use this example. Getting old now, but remember when plasma TVs first came out? They cost $12,000, $10,000, $8,000, $9,000. You can get a plasma TV for $1,000 now. That's better than the one 10 years ago that cost $10,000. Why? Because the people who produce it created such a large market, they found the right price point. That's not happening with health insurance. Health insurance is a government-dominated monopoly and an employer-dominated monopoly. You know more about your car insurance than you do about your health insurance. You make more choices about your car insurance than you do about your health insurance. We need a market of 80 or 90 or 100 million Americans competing for health insurance, and all of a sudden you'll see those prices come down. Then you've got to do tort reform. You've got to take out of the expenses of the medical system all of the cheating that's going on. Now, I know this directly. I ran the New York City Health and Hospitals Corporation. It's the second largest public health system in the country next to the VA. I paid out back in 2001, I don't even know what the number is today, it's probably double. I paid out over $6 billion in claims, $3 billion of which was attributed to the hospital. Most of those claims were phony. A medical procedure has a percentage chance of going wrong, no matter how good the doctor is. A medicine you take has a percentage chance of hurting you, no matter how many people it helps. All of these things are matters of percentage. A very good friend of mine, just 2 days ago, had a kidney transplant. And he knew precisely the odds of what would happen if it didn't work. And he took the risk with his doctor of doing it. Thank God so far it's working. But these are the choices we should be making with our doctors, not with Obama telling us what we have to cover. I mean, I don't want to get crude, but why should I pay, in my insurance policy, for maternity care? I'm 70. I'm not going to tell you my wife's age, because she would, definitely if it was on camera, she would shoot me or something. But we ain't going to have no babies. So why am I paying for maternity care? Or why should I pay for somebody's condoms? I mean, nobody ever paid for mine. We are becoming, slowly and now even faster, we're becoming more like a socialist country than the dynamic, unbelievable entrepreneurial machine that was the wonder of the world. There has never been a country that's accomplished what we've accomplished. Ever, 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 ever in the history of the world. Never. Roman Empire, English Empire, Greek Empire, Ottoman Empire. Every single one of them went to war, and they took territory, and they took loot, and they took money. We fought 2 world wars. We won 2 world wars. I don't know, maybe your grandfather was left behind, or granduncle, or yours, buried in France, or buried in Germany. And Colin Powell always says, America's the only country that when it wins a war and it conquers a country, all it asks for, the only land it asks for, is a place to bury their dead. That is an exceptional country. And anybody who doesn't want to talk about American exceptionalism doesn't understand the magic of America. And instead of we shouldn't be arrogant about it. We should be humble about it, and we should be thankful about it. And we should get up every morning, and if we believe in God, as I do, or if not, believe in luck, we should thank God or thank somebody or something for being so damn lucky that we were born here. And the way I would go with health insurance is I believe that most of the things the private sector does better than government. I've been in government more of my life than the private sector. Government is inefficient, it's ineffective, it's bureaucratic. All of the lessons of leadership that I talked about are hard to do in government because the reward system isn't there of big profit. It's more of a being worried you're going to do something wrong than being driven to doing something successful because you'll be heavily rewarded. So a bureaucracy slows everything down. That's why when Obamacare rolled out, it was such a disaster, because it was a bureaucracy rolling that out. You think if Apple or Amazon or rolled that out, it would have gotten rolled out like that? In fact, if it did, it would have been fixed in 2 days. You see, when Apple rolls out a product incorrectly, in 2 days they fix it because there's a lot of money riding on the line. And there's a big reward if you get it right. So the more we can move out to the private sector, the more effective we're going to be. And the more unlike we are going to be these other countries, like France, where nobody works. I mean, nobody works. 30 hours a week. Sarkozy was going to give them tax-free money if they went over 35 hours a week. And he couldn't even get that through. You go to France and talk to the guy driving your car and ask him how big a vacation he takes. How about 6 weeks? They don't work in Europe. Maybe England is an exception. Maybe Germany is an exception. They don't work. This is a great country with a great work ethic, and it can be eroded pretty quickly with socialistic ideas. And that's why the next election is so important. One more question.
What is your take on the race relationships with the country and the way the police department is being handled in the media?
Okay, I have to talk about the New York City Police Department, which is the only one I can talk about with authority. I think the New York City Police Department has been very, very badly treated by the mayor, by Al Sharpton, and by others, because I know the New York City Police Department. First thing you should know about the New York City Police Department is that it is not an all-white police department. Not only is it not an all-white police department, it is not a majority white police department. That started before me. Before I left, it had happened. And by the time Bloomberg was finished, we are now virtually pretty close to equal numbers of white, black, Hispanic, of course a much smaller percent of Asian because we have a smaller Asian population. But less than 50% of the New York City Police Department are white police officers. And we worked on that to create a police department that reflected the composition of the city. Second, starting in 1997, every single New York City Police Department officer is taught a course on courtesy, professionalism, and respect. How to deal with people, how to diffuse anger, how to deal with riots without reacting back violently. We had a terrible shooting in New York, the Gardner case. You did not see in New York the riots that you saw in Ferguson and St. Louis over the Wilson case. Officer Wilson was involved. And the reason for that is, in part, because the New York City Police Department knows how to prevent riots. I taught them that. And my police commissioners taught them that. And Ray Kelly made them even better at it. So I think the comments that our mayor made about our police department were disgraceful. And I think the police department was wrong to turn their back on him, because you have to respect the office, even if the mayor says something disgraceful. But I understood their anger, and I had 4 uncles who were police officers. I had a cousin who was killed in the line of duty, so I understand their emotion. That happened after 2 New York City police officers were assassinated by a man who came all the way up from Baltimore to New York. So the police officers felt, well, why did he pick New York? Maybe because the politicians in New York, like Sharpton and the mayor, who were very close, were doing a lot of talking about the racial problem in the New York City police department. And these 2 police officers were assassinated. Oh, by the way, one was Hispanic and one was Chinese. And they were guarding a housing development in which there had just been a large number of thefts that was largely an African-American housing development. So they lost their lives trying to protect African-American citizens. None of that was pointed out to you in the media, was it? Or at least not in the kind of detail. Now we go to Ferguson. The man who was killed in Ferguson, that was a completely justifiable police shooting. The man held up a store. He reached into the police officer's car, punched him in the face, and tried to take his gun away. He couldn't succeed in that, and then he began running away. The police officer then got out of the car, pointed the gun at him, and told him to get down on the ground. Instead of getting down on the ground, he ran toward him. Police officer shot him 3 times. The man stopped. Police officer stopped shooting. The man then put his head down, described by 4 witnesses, by the way, 3 of whom were African American, put his head down like a bull and tried to charge into the police officer, which is when the police officer shot and killed him. That's a justifiable police shooting caused by the fact that a man was committing a crime and assaulting a police officer. I am sure that police officer didn't go to work that morning wanting to shoot anybody, white, black, Hispanic, or Chinese. The police officer didn't hold up the convenience store. The police officer didn't punch somebody in the face and try to take their gun away. Some civil rights genius, on a debate I had with him, said to me, well, the police officer should have stayed in his car and just let the man run away. And I said, if that police officer worked for my police department, he would be fired immediately. Because what I expect my police officer to do is to catch criminals, not let them run away. That's what they're trained to do. Police officer who stays in his car better find another job. Now, do I think that police departments in America have some bad police officers who are biased and prejudiced? Of course. Do I think there are some that should make changes so that we have more diversity? I think yes. And do I think that large numbers of African American men feel they are picked on unfairly? The answer is yes. They feel that way, and they're right. But it is not because police officers want to do that. It's because there's such a high incidence of crime in the black community. And the police officers are doing that to protect the black community. I know New York best. My numbers may be a little off, but if they're off by about 10%. 70% of the murders in New York City over the last 10 years, and it's ranged from 68 to 72%. So let's say 70% of the murders in New York City are committed by African Americans. And by African American males, by the way. African Americans constitute only 24% of the population, and males constitute only 11% of that 24%. So I want you to see how disproportionate it is. Now, it is true that 70%, 96% of the time, kills another African American. 12% of the people killed in the city are white, and 8% of the murderers are white. That statistic has been true roughly for the last 20 years, when we had 2,200 murders and we had 380 murders. The percentage remains about the same. What that means is that the police are disproportionately engaged with the people who are committing the crimes. My CompStat system was a statistically based, nerdy, computer-driven system. It sent my cops where the crimes were being committed to save the lives of the people who were the victims of those crimes. I didn't, when I had all those auto thefts in the southern part of Brooklyn, I didn't say to myself, oh gee, I'm going after a bunch of Italian-American goons who are mafia wannabes. I went after them because they were stealing cars of my citizens, and damn it, I wasn't going to let them steal cars from my citizens. And that's why I put a lot of cops there, and that's why I put those characters in jail for 100 years. And when all of a sudden, the most murders in New York City occurred in the northern part of Brooklyn, in Bedford-Stuyvesant, I put a lot of cops in Bedford-Stuyvesant. And you know whose lives I saved? African-American lives. There. That's the reason for it. Should the police learn how to deal with it more effectively? Of course. But my final thought and my final word will be this. If I could somehow make the entire American police officialdom perfect, all 800,000 of them, perfect, never harm anybody incorrectly, always have a justifiable shooting, and approach everyone like the nicest guy or nicest woman in the world. If I did that, it would not have a single effect on the amount of people that are being killed. I'm not going to stop the amount of people that are being killed. Those 70% of black men who are 96% killing other black men aren't doing it because cops aren't nice to them. They're doing it for other reasons. They're complicated reasons. They go back to our history. They go back to slavery, lack of civil rights, lack of opportunity, welfare. Then in some cases, lack of responsibility in the home. Inability of men to take responsibility for the children they father. There are a lot of things that have to be discussed. Inequality in terms of work. There are things on both sides of the aisle, on both sides of the equation, that have to be fixed here. More equality, more opportunity, more jobs. On the other side, more responsibility, more willingness to take responsibility for yourself, more willingness to say, how the hell can you father 4 children with 4 different women and not take care of them? You're a bum. That's what my father would have said to me if I fathered 4 children and wasn't taking care of them. My father was a boxer, and he probably would have put me up against the wall and beat the shit out of me. It's not a simple answer that liberals or conservatives like, because it does require more social programs and more help and more assistance, and it does require taking a lot more responsibilities. And the worst people to be discussing this are the Al Sharptons and the crazy right-wingers, because they can't find any place to meet in the middle. Here's the place to meet in the middle. Fix public education. Public education public education in most of the major cities that have the big crime rates is a disgrace. And it has to be changed. It has to be fixed. I'm getting the thing. I can't tell you how, but I'll give you two. I'll give you one answer. Teachers have to be held accountable for what happens in the classroom. Teachers who do a good job should be paid a lot more money than teachers who do a bad job. Thank you.